I always wanted to quit for like 10 years. I was like, man, I really want to stop using this. I really want to be free. I want to know what I'm like without it. Really, really wanted to stop. And it was like every time I tried, it was like I'd last like 3 days and I'd always end up having a psychotic episode every single time. Like,
Mm,
you did not want me on the road driving when I was not using marijuana, because I was having serious fits of road rage and driving like an absolute maniac, crossing all lanes of traffic on the highway, driving way too fast. And yeah, like serious fits of road rage, getting out of my car and screaming at people, and you know, really crazy. Kicking garbage cans on the road, like I was insane. I would snap at my mom. She threatened to call the cops on me. I'd call her every name in the book.
Welcome, everybody. This is Trees Philosophies, and I'm pleased to be joined by a good friend of mine, Paul. Paul, I met Paul through the church, and he has a very interesting journey towards coming to belief in God, belief in Christ. And it was, once I heard it, I knew that we had to get it recorded. We had to share it for others to hear as well, because I know that I resonated with it, and I know for sure that there's others out there that will also resonate with it. So, without further ado, Paul, how you doing, my brother? Thank you for
Uh,
joining me.
well, thank you for having me.
It's
Doing well.
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So let's start from the beginning. You told me that you were a self-described pothead,
This is true. Uh,
and to the degree where you were, well, I bet, how about you tell me? You tell us how
yeah,
you would put it into
so
your own words.
basically marijuana was my identity. Like big time. Like I actually literally have THC and CBD tattooed on the back of my arms.
Mm-hmm.
And not proud of that. And so for me, basically started with a diagnosis of ADHD as a child, around 12, 13 years old, and then taking Dexedrine, and it's a stimulant, very powerful stimulant medication, and then moving on to Adderall XR, which is a 12-hour spancel of basically the same drug, a very powerful amphetamine. And that led to, I was already dealing with like very bad depression, and just basically my emotions being really in control of me from a very young age. I would say at least from the age of, basically, since I was a child, since I was really young. And just not really being able to regulate my emotions. And anyway, so after a few years of being on stimulants around the age of 16, I was very, very depressed, and I didn't know why. I was like literally, I was suicidal. And I remember I approached my parents and I said, I don't know why I feel this way. I know I have it really good. Like I have a good family, and we're not poor. We don't, like, there's no reason for why I feel this way, but I feel this way. So I reached out to them, and it was very, very difficult to tell them this. I was very ashamed of it. And so they made an appointment with a family doctor, pediatrician, and he referred me to a psychologist who, or a psychiatrist, Dr. Lena, and he asked me, like, what medications are you taking? I told him about Adderall. Anyways, he put me on Wellbutrin, a tricyclic antidepressant, and he gave me, I was taking the maximum dosage. I can't remember what that was, but it's like two big purple pills. You take one in the morning, one in the evening, and it takes about 3 weeks to actually start taking effect. And it actually didn't help. It actually made things worse. I actually became, even, that's actually one of the side effects of that medication. It can actually make you more suicidal, and it can even make you homicidal. And actually, that's where I was at. I was also had like a high school bully, and I was like fantasizing about killing this individual. Okay. And I didn't expect to say all this, but I don't know, edit it out, whatever you need to if you want, if you
No,
need
no
to.
worries, no
So I
worries.
was in a really dire straits. I was not doing well, and I had friends. I had lots of friends, and just wasn't doing well. And it came to the point where I was like actually very paranoid too. And I think part of that is the amphetamines. And actually, as a side note, Wellbutrin, from what I read years ago, is that they actually don't prescribe it to anybody under the age of 18 anymore. And I was like 16 when I was taking this, and I was taking, like I said, the maximum dosage. And but yeah, I got to the point where if anybody was like laughing in the hallway at school, like I thought they were laughing at me for some reason, right? I became very paranoid, and I ended up just like eating lunch by myself on like the fourth floor of our school, and just not wanting to be around people, right, as much as possible. Ride the bus alone on the way home.
Even though you
Uh,
had friends, you
Even though I
said,
had friends, I had close friends as well.
so you were
So
able to maintain relationships to a certain
yeah,
degree
to an
at least.
extent. So my circle of friends got like tighter, and there was only some people that I could really like trust. And even then, being high school, and people aren't really. I don't know. I still had close friends. I still had people that really cared about me, and
Yeah, friendships can be a little
yeah,
bit thicker in those
yeah,
years.
exactly.
But so you were suffering with that ADHD, and the solution for that was to give you medication,
Yeah,
but that medication only made it worse, it sounds like.
yeah. So I also like had no appetite, so I was barely eating. I basically just like drank chocolate milk. That was like my go-to thing. And the doctor, when you're taking that kind of medication, the doctor every 6 months will assess you and make sure that you're still gaining weight, that you're reaching, you're growing or whatever. And he asks you, what's your diet like? What are you eating? And that doctor was known for just prescribing stimulant medication. And but yeah, long story short is, well, it's a long story, but basically, I had a brother that was using marijuana, and it wasn't really like condemned in our household because my dad, he had experience with marijuana, and he just reassured my mother, who was totally against all of anything like that. She didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't she used to smoke cigarettes, but she was totally against marijuana and drinking or anything like that. And my dad just convinced her, like, listen, it's better that he's doing this than drinking, right? For example.
Hmm.
And
So wait. So before we get into that, basically you were doing the medication, it
yeah,
wasn't working, so you were looking for another solution,
yeah. So
and it
yeah,
came to what? Why don't I try weed?
yeah. I was very interested in marijuana, just like curiosity. Like at first, like
Hmm.
when I was younger, like 7 and 8th grade, I told myself I'm never gonna try drugs. Like I'm never gonna smoke marijuana. I'm not totally never gonna do that.
Well,
But then as my one of my older brothers was into it, and it became known to me, and it wasn't really being condemned in my household. I thought like, oh, I really want to try this. And there's like a Simpsons episode with like Homer Simpson has glaucoma, so he gets medical marijuana, and like you're like, oh, what's this like. And
so the pop culture, the society was
yeah,
giving you those
so I
signs
was
that
yeah I
okay,
was
it might be
yeah
okay.
really interested in trying it.
Hmm.
And what happened exactly? Oh yeah,
So your
so
brother,
yeah,
your brother was the first influence
yeah, he
within
was
your
the
immediate
yeah
family
yeah
or
he
the
rolled the
closest.
first joint that I ever smoked. Actually,
Okay.
yeah. So I
Uh-huh.
went to him and I was like, I really want to try this. And
So you knew that he was doing it before, but you had no interest in trying it actually. But then you were so desperate
well,
for.
no, actually, so what happened was it was when I knew that he was using it, and that it wasn't being condemned in my household, that I became more curious, and it was like within my reach, and that I knew I wasn't gonna be like, I was still gonna keep it a secret from my parents, right? But
Right,
but
right.
the big thing that happened was that when I was around, actually no, I was already a pothead by then, but so I only got into it around 15 years old. And then at that point, it was just like a novelty. It was something that I wanted to do recreationally, whatever. But it quickly became a daily thing that I absolutely needed. Like I had to have it. It was like my whole day revolved around like, oh, I'm gonna get a half a gram or a gram after school from the high school dealer or whatever. And if I didn't have any or didn't have the money or whatever, I'd actually go through my brother had like a a tin, like a metal tin,
Mm-hmm.
where he saved all of his stems, and I would
Mm.
go through the stems and pick the little tiny
Right.
remainder of bud that was on it,
Right. Right.
and I would smoke that, right? And back then, like, yeah, I was getting like really, really, really high on it.
So this was on top of the medication that you were
Yeah,
already on.
yeah. So I was
I see.
also taking Adderall, and
So you were mixing the two together.
yeah, and I was on the antidepressants as well,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not at that, and maybe not yet at that point. Maybe it's around 16 that I started taking the antidepressants, started experimenting with marijuana around 15, maybe 16, and yeah, it quickly became a daily thing.
How
And
long did it take for it to become daily?
I think maybe about like maybe a year. I'm
Mm.
not really sure. I can't say for sure, but
So within a year, it went from just doing
yeah,
it time to
it
time
went
with
from a
buddies.
novelty thing to it was like my goal was like, oh, this weekend I'm gonna get as high as I possibly can,
Mm.
and trying to get other kids my age to participate with me, right?
So you're recruiting at that point.
Yeah, basically. And
So
there
going
and
from like
yeah,
wake and bakes to the
well,
evening, morning
yeah,
to evening, basically.
well, then not at that point. It was like it became like a thing to do at lunchtime as well.
Right,
And I
right,
actually
right.
got caught a couple times at school
Yeah.
for that, and luckily I did not get expelled. I might have been suspended
Mm,
once, and then the second time, the principal kind of knew my family, and he was giving me ways to get out of it,
mm,
even though the teacher that caught me knew for sure that I was stoned after lunchtime, and he had like a vendetta about, it was a good thing. He was very against it, and he didn't want it to be tolerated within our school,
mm-hmm.
and so he was very upset that the principal let me off that time, and
So you were given second chances.
yeah, and then so what
Do you feel
happened
like that
was
was almost a detriment? Maybe had you had that harsh judgment on you in that moment, do you think that would have made a difference, or were you just so far down that path it wouldn't have
it.
mattered?
I
It's hard to say. Maybe.
it honestly, it probably would have made things. It probably would have made me go into it even more, even
Mm.
faster.
Hmm.
Okay,
Or made you
and
like double down in it,
yeah, because
the
what
authority.
happened was around, I can't remember, it's like 10th grade, we had like a computer programming class, like very basic programming,
Mm-hmm.
and informatic they called it, right? So during that class, you could go on the internet and look stuff up, right, on your spare time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a graph that showed all these different drugs, right? It was like caffeine, marijuana, amphetamines, heroin, whatever, and it showed this graph of like how toxic the drug is and how addictive the drug is.
Mm-hmm.
And marijuana was actually below caffeine in terms of its addictive qualities and its
Mm.
toxicity.
Wow.
So it's basically non-toxic, right?
Right, right,
Like you can't technically die from consuming marijuana,
right.
any amount. So
So it was just more reinforcement
yeah,
for you to
yeah,
believe, like,
and
okay,
yeah,
this is
and
not
I
something
saw that
harmful.
amphetamines were actually considered highly addictive and highly toxic on that graph, and I was
Mm,
like, man, I'm like, how is it that I'm taking this medication that's perfectly legal for me to take, that's highly addictive and highly toxic and could kill me, meanwhile this drug that is completely illegal and vilified and condemned is non-toxic and non-addictive, and I honestly think it's one of the most addictive things on the planet. That's my
mm,
opinion, and I've heard other people say that too. They've That people that were addicted to horrible things, and they said marijuana was the hardest thing to actually quit
mm.
because, oh, it's natural, and it's, we justify it, right, more so
Right.
than everything else.
There's that
And
psychological justification that comes with it.
yeah, so
But I mean, at that time, when you're looking at that graph, it's not an illegitimate question to ask
yeah,
of,
no,
okay,
not
I'm
at
taking
all.
these
It's a
amphetamines.
major hypocrisy. So that upset me, and it made me, you know another thing too is that there were like articles. There was like I can't remember what the name of the magazine, but there was a magazine that's all about marijuana, medical marijuana, and they were making the case that it actually really helps people with ADHD. And so I made the case to my mom, like, look, this actually really helps, but the problem is because it's illegal, it's very expensive, and it's also you also don't know what you're actually getting, right? And you're not
Mm-hmm.
getting, there's so many different strains that have a different effect, that if you could find the strain that works for ADHD and you had consistent access to it and you weren't paying through the nose for it and you knew that it was clean because it was grown in a responsible way or whatever, that it would actually be safe, right? And actually better. And so
Right.
I made that case to my parents and to my mom, and she was still very much against it. And one thing that happened was my oldest brother got diagnosed with celiac disease, like through a biopsy.
And
And
just for
then
anybody that's wondering, he's got the legit tattoos there.
yeah,
He's not lying. He's not lying. Yeah.
I always had long hair,
He was a
and
devotee.
yeah, I was
Uh-huh.
big time into it. And so I had an older brother. I have three older brothers, and one of them was living in Montreal, and he was also diagnosed with ADHD. He took the same medication, and he ended up having a major burnout and couldn't finish his schooling, and he was basically dying. Like he was sick as a dog. He was like very very thin, and it came to they concluded that he had celiac disease. They did a biopsy and it said, oh, you have celiac disease. You got to stop eating wheat. Blah blah blah. And then
Sorry, what's celiac
a
disease? Just
celiac
for people
disease
that don't
is
know.
you basically can't, your body starts to like attack its own villi, and that's another whole topic because I'm not super strict about that anymore. But basically, that's what they say, is that the villi in your intestinal tract, this the most microscopic part of your intestinal tract that absorbs nutrients, starts to atrophy, because your body is having an autoimmune reaction to the gluten, which is the wheat that's contained in basically all grains, but wheat has the highest content of gluten, and it's wheat gluten specifically, but all gluten is really just not easy to digest. And so they say, okay, it's usually if one person has it in the family, there's more than one person in the family that has it. So we all got tested, and we all went on a gluten free diet. And so I actually went to see, so because celiac disease can cause a lot of nutritional deficiencies, we went to Nutrichem Biomedical Pharmacy in Ottawa, and I got a bunch of blood samples taken and to see what I was deficient in. And we had a consultation with the doctor there, my mom, and the doctor. And the doctor, being, a very highly educated individual, said to my mom, he's like, basically what needs to happen is that your kid needs to get on a gluten-free diet. He needs to eat more protein and healthy fats and stuff, and he needs to stop taking this medication, the Adderall.
Oh wow! So the doctor was
Yeah,
actually telling you to get off the
the
medication.
doctor said, he's like, every time he's trying to explain it in layman's terms, but he's like, every time he takes this drug, and that's the thing about Adderall. It's like you build a tolerance to it, and the doctor who's prescribing it keeps upping the dose as it loses effectiveness, right?
Mm.
So he was saying every time you're taking this medication, it's like there's a bathtub of different chemicals in your brain, like dopamine or neuropinephrine or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's like you're unplugging that bathtub and you're draining all of that, and it's flooding the brain. And what's happening is, because you're not, your nutrition isn't there, it's not replenishing those chemicals fast enough, right? And so he's like, he needs to get on a gluten-free diet, eat healthier, and get off this medication. And my mom said, so he said, he's like, this, you got to get off these amphetamines, is really bad. And she said, oh, well, what I'm really concerned about is his marijuana use. And he said to her, I'll never forget this scene in my head. He said to her, he was so upset with her. He said, lady, and nobody talks to my mom like that.
Mm.
Uh, she was a big boss in the government, like Director General of Health Canada and stuff. And he
Oh
said
wow.
to her, he said, lady, if I was hopped up on those pills or, that medication, he's like, I'd be sitting there smoking too.
Mm.
Because marijuana obviously helps you sleep, right? And the
Mm.
medication, like I was an insomniac, like I wasn't sleeping. I was taking this 12-hour Adderall and I'm not sleeping at night, and I'm
Right.
not really understanding, what's really going on, right?
So the Adderall was keeping you up,
Oh
and
yeah,
then
I
he
had
needed to weed to
major
help you sleep.
major problems with sleep. Like I remember like breaking my alarm clock because I was so frustrated at just looking at the time and
Wow.
not being able to fall asleep, right? So Yeah, so he said to her, he's like, if I was hopped up, she was concerned about the marijuana use, and he just said, he's like, if I was on those drugs, like I'd be sitting there smoking too, like that's how bad these drugs are. And so anyway,
So
so my mom basically, she just always had it in for marijuana, right? And didn't listen to what he was saying, and
so this was kind of like an opportunity for you to almost double down in your conviction, like,
yeah,
hey, see,
yeah,
mom, even the doctor is
yeah.
saying that
So
this is
yeah,
good or
I
this is
felt this.
justified.
Yeah, and the reality is that I chose, like, for the longest time I blamed my parents, or I blamed my mom for, like, oh, they put me on this medication, but in reality I actually wanted the diagnosis. I wanted that attention. I wanted to feel special and whatever. And ultimately it was me that was taking it. Nobody was forcing it down my throat. Nobody watched me take it. I chose to put it in my mouth and swallow it, right? So
Tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean that you were doing it for attention?
I just so my older brother Dominic, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and I would make fun of him, right? I would call
Hmm.
him Ritalin boy. He wasn't even. I don't think he was even taking Ritalin, but I call him Ritalin boy, until he would finally like hit me, right? And it was very well deserved. But I always looked up to him as well, right?
Hmm.
So I actually wanted to be diagnosed with ADHD,
Hmm.
and
Because of you saw your older brother who you kind of idolized, so you're like, I want to be like him, subconsciously
yeah, oh
almost.
yeah, definitely,
Huh.
and yeah, I just remember like my dad picking me up from school to go see the psychiatrist, like when I was depressed, and to get on these antidepressants or whatever. It's like it was like I was getting attention, and it didn't matter if it wasn't good attention. It was attention, and I wanted it, right? Or
Hmm.
I wanted to be different. Or I wanted to feel special somehow, or whatever.
So it was almost a desperate call for love. You needed that love in a special kind of way.
Yeah, quite possibly. Like that. Yeah, that would not surprise me at all. So, but basically,
And I just want to just even taking a step back. When you say that you were diagnosed with ADHD,
yeah,
how did that manifest itself? Because ADHD is that term that's used so often
yeah.
in society now. But how did that manifest itself in you? Like, how did that
So
show itself?
it was so oftentimes this is a big problem with the system, is that it will be a teacher that will say, "Oh, the kid's not really paying attention, different issues, and maybe you should go see a guidance counselor or whatever." And the guidance counselor will kind of like initiate that the step
Process.
towards seeing a doctor and
Hmm.
getting the diagnosis.
Hmm.
I remember seeing a guidance counselor, or whatever they call them, like a social worker,
Hmm.
in like 7th and 8th grade, and she was like to help me with like organizing and whatever. But I was already on the medication at that point. But I did want it, But my mom, like seeing that my brother had already been diagnosed, was already on the medication. My mom decided, like, okay, I'm gonna bring you to see a child psychologist, and they did an assessment for ADHD. And I actually saw the documents as an adult. Like the conclusion was he's not quite fully ADHD, but maybe he's like 3/4 ADHD. And
Three quarters.
my suggestion is that he starts on like 15 milligrams of dexedrine and see if it doesn't help, and go from there, right?
So it's like a system where the teacher takes you to the guidance counselor refers you to the doctor, and
Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly how it went, but I think in my case it was more just the fact that I was starting to do worse and worse in school, but there was also a lot of other factors involved in that. Like I'd switched schools, and just like anxiety and whatever. There was lots of other reasons why. And there's a lot of the school I went to is really, really quite messed up as well. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on,
mm,
and
they said you had some bullies and stuff. So I'm sure that contributed to some of the
yeah, the
anxiety you were
bullying was,
feeling.
yeah, was later on, especially like when I was on the antidepressants. I was like so out of myself, but
Hmm.
yeah, there's just like the school I went to was just out of control. There was a lot of like there's students barricading teachers out of the classroom type of thing, right?
Okay,
Like destroying tiles on the ceilings, like just a lot of, it was just out of control.
chaos.
Yeah, and I had switched from that school to another school, and that's when I got onto the antidepressants and stuff.
Hmm.
But but yeah, in my case, it was more the fact that I think like I wasn't doing very well in school, and uh, I for sure that I wanted the diagnosis, and my mom, decided to get me to go see a psychologist that assessed me for ADHD. And so, but anyways, like I kind of like created my own story in my head of like, blaming everybody else, right?
Right.
But
And that's so
basically, yes,
important,
yeah,
just that self-talk that we go through,
yeah,
and the story that we tell ourselves. I think that's so key, because maybe some people listening haven't even considered that
yeah,
is this the things that I'm hearing in my head, is it truly me, or is it just a story that I'm telling myself in order to bring some comfort to me?
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
to kind of like justify yourself.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's really hard to
So
really,
at this point, you are doubling down into the weed. Again, the doctor is telling your mom that, hey, he's fully justified in smoking. So at that point, were you continuing with the
yeah.
medication, or were you
Oh
like,
yeah,
okay,
I was
I'm
so I
done?
was still taking the Adderall, and that was ultimately my choice. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
forced me to take it, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
kept
Mm-hmm.
taking it, and I actually started abusing it at this point. So I was now like crushing it and doing things to it to make it, easier to what's the word I'm looking for? Insufflate it. Okay, put it up your nose,
Right. Right. Just
diluting it in water and just drinking
other
it to,
ways of
yeah,
consuming.
to
Other
go
ways.
around the time released,
Right.
technology that was in it. Adderall XR extended release. Every little bead inside the capsule is coated with a polymer coating, and there's ways that you can actually remove that. And
Right. Right. Right.
anyway, so I was finding ways to abuse it because I saw other kids in the school that were doing that, older kids that were doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they found out that I had a prescription, they were asking me to trade some of my prescription for marijuana. So I was
Okay.
doing that. And and yeah, and then my older brother Dominic, as well, I shouldn't have said his name there, but I don't think you're gonna care. But he was really into marijuana as well, and he was living in
Mm-hmm.
Montreal. So whenever I hung out with him, we'd smoke, and and he was really getting into the whole like medical marijuana, and so that influenced me as well. So I was like, even more, I just felt like marijuana was the greatest thing ever, and these medications are horrible, and there's this huge hypocrisy and injustice going on in society where adults can't choose to use this natural, non-toxic, non-addictive substance. Meanwhile, you know in my mind, being forced to take these harmful drugs for ADHD, right? So
So you say force, even though it was also part of your choice as
yeah, of
well. But
course.
at the time, it
Yeah,
felt like it was forced,
yeah,
but subconsciously, it was kind of your own choice too.
yeah. So
It's interesting to
yeah,
just go
and then
back and think
finally
about that.
around like 18 years old, 18, 19 years old, I completely stopped using amphetamines, the Adderall, and I was already off the antidepressants. I took the antidepressants for about a year, and that made things worse. I became way more suicidal, and I turned to marijuana even more.
Mm.
And then by the time I graduated high school, I was a full blown pothead. It was already like totally my identity. It's all I wanted to do. It was at lunchtime. It was after school. It was before bed. It was sometimes before school. Um, and
So when you say it was
yeah.
part of your identity, did other people see
Oh
you
yeah.
as that as well?
Oh yeah, big time. I had long hair. That was my thing. And I
Mm.
had friends that were also really into it, and we would
You're
we
part
would
of the
hang
stoner
out. Right?
crew.
Yeah, yeah, big time,
Okay.
big time.
So, so not only yourself, but also the people that
Oh
you
yeah,
chose to surround
oh yeah.
yourself with.
Every
Everybody.
lunchtime, we'd go to the same place, and we'd all hang out, and we'd mix our pot together, and roll joints, and smoke weed, and try not to get caught after the fact, basically.
Hmm.
And so anyway, so after high school, I eventually got off the amphetamines completely, cold turkey, just stopped getting my prescriptions filled, stopped picking them up, nothing to do with it. And then I even like marijuana was actually helpful in that sense because I was able to just go from that to just straight up using marijuana, right? Without, I don't remember having any like side effects or withdrawals from the amphetamines because I had the marijuana still to regulate my emotions or make me feel better or not get angry or irritated or whatever from having
I
quit
see.
the medication for ADHD. So I got into it even more. It was like, so now at this point I really wanted to grow my own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had convinced my mom to let me grow in where she was living, right, in this condo. And she was again very against it. And I convinced her to, very convincing, just letting me do this. But then by the time I actually started getting some buds growing, she was like, I don't want nothing to do with this. She found me an apartment very close by, a few blocks away, and said, you need to move. You need to go if you want to, you do your own thing, but don't do it here. And so the first thing I did when I moved out is I built a little like grow box out of plywood, and I went throughout the city to find a small grow light, a 250 watt, HPS light, which is not easy to find, at least back then. And yeah, set it up, and so then I was growing,
Took
and
matters into your own
yeah, I
hands.
just pursued that, and I was obsessed with growing, and I was super passionate about it. Like I learned so much about growing marijuana, so much about hydroponics, and uh, just yeah, just taught, I self-taught, like just learned so much. I couldn't get enough of learning about growing and the excitement of it, like of what you learn from this grow and yeah, you're going to apply to the next grow. That's the hardest part of being a gardener, is waiting, if you're growing outdoors, to wait a full year and to apply the lessons you learned from the previous year to your next grow, right, to improve on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very exciting and I really enjoyed it. And
So your passion grew from not only consuming it but to growing it as
yeah,
well
oh yeah,
and
I really believe, like,
learning
and I
about
still
it.
do. I still think marijuana has a place in medicine, right? And yeah, I still think marijuana is an amazing thing, and like just knowing the history of it, like like the petrochemical industry wanting to vilify it and to not use hemp fiber for all kinds of different industrial applications so that they could keep cutting down trees and using their chemicals to separate the wood pulp and whatever, right? There's
Right.
so many
Yeah, there's
reasons
a
why
long
our
history for
society
sure,
is
for sure.
the how why society is the way it is, and hemp has kind of been put to the side when before it was actually used for making rope, and
Right.
still is, and it's
So
very
you were
strong
learning
fiber,
about it,
right?
you're becoming more passionate about it,
Yeah.
becoming more fuel
Oh
to
yeah, I knew I was like the
continue.
biggest nerd when it came to hemp and marijuana, right? I knew everything about it, even like the actual seeds themselves. Like a lot of people don't realize that hemp seeds,
Mm-hmm.
which have a complete amino acid profile, balanced omega 369 with GLA,
Mm-hmm.
gamma linoleic acid. Very few plants actually produce that type of acid, or gamma linoleic acid. Very healthy, and it has, yeah, a complete amino acid profile. It's a very healthy food to eat, and people don't realize that hemp seeds are identical to marijuana seeds. There's no difference. If you hull marijuana seeds, you get hemp seeds, and there's no THC in it, and it's very good for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I was very passionate about it. I felt very strongly about it, and I really wanted to grow it, and I did. And that was like my goal in life, was just to pursue growing marijuana. And it went from, oh, I just want to grow it for to have my own supply that I know is safe and trustworthy and not spending an arm and a leg on it, to wanting to sell it and wanting to make big bucks, right? I was like Ricky from Trailer Park Boys, and I didn't realize it up until like literally like 5 years ago. I was like, man, I actually, like, that's in my mind, like, I'm gonna grow enough pot that I'll be able to retire young, and like get a
What is it,
house,
Freedom
and
45 or something?
exactly, not even like Freedom 30, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it just never worked out, right? It was like, and it was also getting more and more competitive, right? There was always more and more growers, more and more marijuana on the market, and then with the government legalizing it, um,
Mm-hmm.
it just got harder and harder and harder, right? And that's why I was like, oh well, the problem is I'm not growing enough, right? I got to grow more and more and more and more and more,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And that's gonna, so I really got into it, right? I had like two bud trimming machines and all kinds of equipment.
Right.
I spent so much money in this, I spent most of the money I made to put it back into it to grow even more the next year, and it was my entire identity, right?
Right. So you completely embody that identity
Yeah,
from
I
smoking
was
to
all in.
learning to
Yeah,
growing
I
to
was all
producing.
in. Yeah,
Truly,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. Which is why I got the tattoos in the back of my.
Right.
I just wanted tattoos in the back of my arms. Like, oh, what am I gonna get? I'm like, oh, I'll get that, you know.
Yeah. Why
And
not the thing that you love the most,
yeah,
right?
I had long, long hair, and
Hmm.
it was how I regulated my emotions. And so
So
I was using more and more and more marijuana, and then getting into hash,
so
and
just as you were doing that, were things improving in terms of the ADHD and the mental
no,
side of it, or?
no. I mean, I was always like, if whatever I was passionate about that I wanted to learn about, I could hyper focus on and learn as much as I could about it, no problem, right? When I was on marijuana, even when I was on marijuana, right?
Mhm.
But it was my way of regulating emotions, right? And there was other things that had gone on in my life that really left me feeling like I had been done really, really wrong by people that were very close to me that I never thought could possibly betray me on that level. And
So experiencing that suffering from
yeah,
loss and betrayal.
and it just had so much anger, like so much anger towards these people, and then ultimately making this story in my mind that it's my parents' fault ultimately because they put me on this medication that led me down this path of getting onto marijuana and then basically not having a life. Like my life was marijuana. I couldn't really like all I had done like work wise before that was washing dishes, right? And that was very brutally difficult work. And that was like the job that I held the longest was dishwashing. So in my mind, I'm like, well, marijuana is not easy to grow marijuana. It's very, very difficult. It is very labor intensive,
Sure.
but it still is easier than washing dishes. And there's more money to be made doing it. So in my mind, I'm like, well, it's an easy pick for me. I'm gonna go all into this, right?
Hmm.
And
So you're still doing the weed, but or you're doubling down on the
yeah,
weed, tripling down, and the anxiety, the anger, though, is growing.
yeah. So basically, it's like I couldn't quit because every time I tried to quit, all of these things I was trying, all these feelings I was trying to avoid and, regulate, like my anger and depression and all of it was just like that's how I regulated my emotions. So as soon as I tried to quit, all those things would bubble back up and I didn't want to face it. So
It was a way of numbing the pain.
yeah, it was just every day. First thing I did when I got up in the morning, and then getting it, like I was telling you, is like getting into butane hash oil and making large amounts of it,
Right. So this is
and
where you're concentrating
yeah,
the weed to a higher
yeah. So
THC potency.
you're extracting the essential oils out of the plant material, and what you're left with is basically at least 80% pure THC. And the stuff I was making was very high quality. They're talking about a vacuum oven, and it was brittle like glass. It was really, really just like pure
To
essential oil.
shatter.
Yeah, and I
And you
was
said at one point, how much were you
at
smoking of that?
least a gram a day. At least a gram a day.
Of
Like
the shatter.
I wasn't weighing it out, but I knew what a gram looked like,
Yeah.
and I was smoking at least a gram a day of shatter to the point of
Which
like,
to people that don't know what that is an insane amount
yeah,
of THC.
it takes like a pinhead of this, especially if you don't have a tolerance. Even if you do, it takes very, very, very little to. It's like smoking one puff of this stuff is the equivalent of smoking an entire joint to yourself, right? So
And you were smoking a gram of it.
I was smoking a gram a day of that, right? And I was also even like consuming edibles. Um,
Edibles on top of that.
oh yeah, I was like, I had a ridiculously high tolerance, right?
Wow.
It took a lot for me to even to really get stoned to the point of having my eyes red, right?
Right. Right.
But yeah, even like way before even getting into the actually no, I was already into it, but I wasn't making my own or whatever. But I remember I made a cake with with literally an ounce of pot in it of
Hmm.
high quality stuff, and I ate the whole cake within like 24 hours, and I was still functional. I could go to work and work very well, and I had a huge smile, and it was and
Wow.
people thought it was hilarious, right? So that's what I was basically known for, is being a huge pothead, but still very much functional. And yeah, so basically I couldn't stop because it's deeper than just like, oh, it's just like this substance I got to get rid of. It's like, no, this is a substance I'm using to avoid how I, avoid what's really going on inside, right? So incredible anger towards my parents, anger towards just people, the closest people in my life that, betrayed me on a very deep level. And so
And the weed was the way to cope with that.
yeah, it was big time. And I always wanted to quit for like 10 years. I was like, man, I really want to stop using this. I really want to be free. I want to know what I'm like without it. Really, really wanted to stop. And it was like every time I tried, it was like I'd last like 3 days and I'd always end up having a psychotic episode every single time. Like,
Mm,
you did not want me on the road driving when I was not using marijuana, because I was having serious fits of road rage and driving like an absolute maniac, crossing all lanes of traffic on the highway, driving way too fast. And yeah, like serious fits of road rage, getting out of my car and screaming at people, and, you know, really crazy. Kicking garbage cans on the road. Like, I was insane. I would snap at my mom. She threatened to call the cops on me. I'd call her every name in the book, and you know,
but even though that was happening, you knew deep down that you should be quitting. That this
yeah,
isn't right.
yeah.
Was it the fact that you were just doing it so much that you just realized this is not healthy, or what made you
Well,
come to
that
that
is another
conclusion?
thing too. Is just like smoking to the point of I started getting paranoid that I would end up with a collapsed lung, or yeah, it's just like, it can't be healthy. Like, think about how sticky this stuff is and the amount that I'm smoking. I'm like, it's gotta be, and like, you could feel it, like when I breathed, right? Like when I turned my neck before bed or whatever, you could there was like a weird sound going on. I was
Hmm.
like, dude, this can't be good. Um,
Right. So
yeah,
tell me a bit about the just what you were saying before about how you were feeling so much anger and so much resentment, and you were trying to put that aside, but you had that thought that, you know what, maybe I should lean into this anger. I should lean into the hatred. I should just be a bad guy. Like
yeah. So
what was
basically,
that?
it was just like, so after like serious betrayal that I went through in my early 20s, I was um
And can you go into that betrayal, like what it
so
was, or if you
basically,
want
is
to?
like, is
You don't
my,
have to.
yeah, it was my high school sweetheart. Went to BC for tree planting, and within a few weeks was sort of seeing someone else, and she was and I knew something was really off, and she was like, no, no, everything's fine. It's crazy. It's actually crazy making when you know deep down something's going on, and you trust your gut, and you're like, yes, something's going on, and the person is denying it, and it actually makes you think that you're crazy. And then that came to light, and I was very upset, obviously, and we tried to work things out as best we could, and I thought we had, and then it happened again with a different individual, also in BC during that same summer, and I was like 23 at the time, um, and at that point, it was just like the most devastating thing that I dealt with. I couldn't believe that. I just never thought in a million years this person would ever do anything like that. And so it was a major, major betrayal at that point. It's like, well, who can you trust? Like, um,
How long had you been together for at that
we
point?
had been together like 6 years,
6 years.
maybe 7.
Wow.
It was like on and off for a year. And
So it's a person that you trust, that you
yeah.
love with all
And
your heart.
another thing too is like, and looking back, it's like, why was it so devastating to me? Is because this person was carrying a huge weight, right? Because I was relying on them to be my best friend, my confidant, like, and that's not a bad thing. I believe that should, like if, like, your wife should be that for you, and I have that now, and I trust Ronnie completely, right? Um, but I never thought that I would ever get to the point where I could actually, have that again, right? Like that I would never be able to trust somebody to that point. Um,
But you do acknowledge that you were almost putting too much of a burden on them.
yeah, yeah,
That
definitely.
you were too much of a weight for them
Yeah,
to
and
carry
again, and like,
almost.
and looking back as well, it's like I know that I was abusive in certain ways, right? So, and in some ways, it wasn't on purpose. I didn't know how to be, healthy. Like, and
Yeah.
that again has a lot
What
to
is a
do with,
proper man, right?
yeah,
Who
about, my own upbringing with my father, and he had major fits of rage, and it definitely took its toll. So,
mm.
um,
So do you believe that what you saw as a child with your father and the rage that he experienced, did some of that kind of subconsciously go into you or
yeah,
something?
definitely. So it made me into and I still am to this day, a people pleaser. So I'm afraid that if I don't do what people expect of me or what they want from me, or if I do anything wrong, that they're gonna get really angry with me and yell at me. And the thing is about my dad's fits of rage were so strong, were so intense from such a young age, that was actually, like, I literally remember, like, one of my first thoughts I could remember from my childhood is thinking to myself, like, we lived behind a park, and I thought that all the kids in the park were my siblings that my dad had thrown out of the house because they were bad,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
And even just like, if I'm at a restaurant, I'm afraid that the waitress is gonna get, or the waiter will be upset with me if I take too long to decide what I want to order, or if I'm asking, you know,
Wow.
for too much or whatever, right? It's like this
And
constant fear. And even like every job I've ever had, I'm always afraid the boss or my coworker is gonna yell at me or get upset with me, and it's never happened. It's literally never happened, right?
right.
It's never happened, but you still is still afraid, right?
Just
So
from the
yeah,
experiences of your
it
dad yelling
caused
at you.
incredible stress, right?
Wow.
And yeah,
So yeah, that anger essentially seeped into you, and you were eventually kind of trying to lean into it. Was what you were telling me that
yeah. So
you were.
so after all the betrayal and everything, I basically just started losing my mind at that point, and I was, so broken, and I was just starting to treat people like absolute garbage. Like everything was everybody else's fault, and
Embracing the victim mentality.
it's my parents' fault for putting me on this medication that led me to being a pothead, that led me to to my girlfriend cheating on me. Like, I don't
Hmm.
really, it doesn't really make any sense, but at the time that was my thinking, right? It was like it's everyone else's fault that my life is the way it is. And yeah, so then basically like treating people like really badly, and like they say, it's like the words can cut deep, right? So saying things to friends that were very, very detrimental, and I don't honestly, I don't want to say I don't regret it, but sometimes things are just meant to happen a certain way, that I literally look back and I think God was like wanted me to part ways with these individuals because they were very liberal, highly educated, and couldn't really, they weren't really looking for the truth, right? But
Right. It's so hard to
but
understand
yeah,
how
so
these things
yeah,
played
so
out, right?
so basically I was hurting relationships so badly and beyond repair, and instead of, taking responsibility for it, I was so ashamed. Like, so I would have so much anger, and I would say such horrible things or do such horrible things, that this shame was so great that I couldn't face it. So instead of facing it and taking ownership for what I had done, I was justifying myself and what I had done. Well, no, they deserved it because of this and that and whatever, and then just like burning bridges. And this is a pattern that was going on for a long time. And so, again, turning to marijuana to regulate my emotions when I felt this incredible shame or this incredible anger, I would just turn to marijuana. And then at one time I was like smoking, and I thought to myself, I'm like, well, maybe the problem isn't that I'm doing evil. Essentially, I wouldn't have called it that back then, but that's what it was. The problem is that I'm trying to be good when I'm not meant to be good. Maybe I'm just meant to be this evil person who's justified in his anger and should actually just pursue that to its fullest extent instead of trying to fight it and to be a better person, to just embrace that side of myself, and that would give me peace,
Wow,
right? So yeah,
that's
that's a very sad thing to think, but that's why I'm able to relate to people who are in a very, very dire straits, and that, homeless people that have serious, mental problems, because I could easily have been them, right? If it wasn't for my family and the support that I had, I would have ended up homeless, right? If it
mhm,
wasn't for my dad letting me live with him, I would have been homeless. I would have had nowhere to go, really.
right.
So,
And that's a
yeah,
powerful thing for people, I think, at home to hear. Just the fact of how you can be so um, broken to the point where you know that you're doing wrong, but you know what? You're like, hey, why don't I just go into it more? So why don't I just lean into it? Why don't I just embrace that? And that reminds me of the story of the Nazis in World War II, and how eventually during the Nuremberg trial, it came to the point of how um, evil runs through the individual.
yeah,
Evil doesn't run through society or the group. Of course, there's the group think and the group mentality and the hive mind that does take over. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the heart, and each person makes that choice between good and evil that runs inside of them, that runs against that conscious that tells them that no, what you're doing is absolutely wrong. But we all have to make that choice. We all have to make that decision of, am I going to embrace this evil that's inside of me, that's inside all of us, which we all know to be true just by virtue of what we see in the world first and foremost, but also what's given to us in the Bible, in the Word, that we are fallen creatures. Every single
yeah,
one of us comes from that line of Adam, and we have that brokenness, that evilness inside of us, and it's
yeah,
on each of us to make that choice. Not for anybody to make that choice for us to be good, but rather to recognize the evil that's within us and actively, on a daily basis, on a
yeah,
minute to minute basis, be faced with it and forced to make that decision. Am I going to go down the evil path, or am I not? Am I going to
yeah.
choose good? So tell me about, okay, you're
Yeah,
so,
actually, to add to
please.
that, what I would say is like, so like the really, like a really simple way to put it was like, I was suffering so much that the only way I could feel better was to make other people suffer. Okay. Another thing is that actually makes me, like, because I believe the Bible is completely true, is I realize that, people think that they don't have the capacity to commit incredibly heinous acts, right? And I know deep down that I am capable of the most horrific things, the most that you could possibly imagine. I know that capacity is in me, right? So I can't look down on other people for their sin, and to say, oh well, they're worse than I am. I really see it from the perspectives, like God's perspective on sin is that there's I don't think he sees one sin as being worse than the other. It actually says that if you're guilty of breaking one of the 10 commandments, you're actually guilty of breaking all of them. So we as humans think of, oh well, this sin isn't so bad, but that sin is worse, and then so I'm holier than this person, but in reality, we're all sinners. We all deserve eternal punishment, right? But we get this free gift of salvation that is only available through accepting the fact that Jesus Christ died for sinners. He came to save sinners, not to condemn them. And that's a very sad thing that Satan has been able to convince most of the world that God is against you when he really isn't. Right? It's amazing how much Yeah.
the lie that's been
It's a,
told that
yeah, how
yeah,
we
God
have
is evil
embraced
guy.
we've
Yeah.
embraced Satan, and yet when
Mm-hmm.
God enters his own creation, we kill him.
Mm.
And he still loved us enough to do that, knowing that we would do that. Like, it's actually mind blowing, right?
So yeah, let's jump into that part of the story of how you're facing this anger and you were thinking about even taking your life at some point too.
Yeah, so
This,
that's
you want
another
to,
thing. So it's
yeah.
like my since I was a child, basically, is like going through is very rare that I could go through even 1 month without feeling extremely depressed or suicidal and sabotaging anything that I've accomplished, or looking at anything I've done that as being like less than dirt, and that it's never good enough, or stuff like that. So, and this was going on for most of my life, right up until even just a few years ago. This feeling of just, yeah, just horrible suicidal depression, to the point of wanting to hurt other people, and burning bridges and destroying relationships, and then feeling this incredible shame, to the point of just wanting to disappear, or like run away, or like move cities, or something, right? Just not wanting to face it, and not being able to break out of that pattern. So I was looking for help, like anywhere I could, right? And my mom spent, I'm sure she spent at least 20 G's on alternative like therapies, or um, modes of healing. Whether it was even like one of the last things I tried was like Reiki, like energy healing, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I tried hypnotism, like I was telling you. I went to see a homeopath. I went to see I She paid for an iridologist, and that's actually really pretty incredible stuff. Very, it's actually legit. But he'll take a picture of your iris, and then be able to tell you, literally was able to tell me more about myself than I knew about myself, and what to do to actually
Yeah.
try to heal from that, right? Um,
So you got
uh,
to the point where you were so desperate because you were thinking about taking your life, so you were
yeah,
trying
I'd be
all
willing to
these
try
different
anything,
things.
right?
You were trying.
Psychedelics, mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, anything that could help me, I'd be willing to try it, right? And
And
nothing was permanent, nothing lasted, right? Like, you would get something out of it, but ultimately would fall back into these patterns of just suicidal depression. And it got to the point where I thought, that I actually really should, like, it's this difference between ideation and then really starting to plan for it. And when I started to plan for it, I actually thought that was my clearest thinking ever. That I was like, man, no, this is actually the right thing to do, because you're hurting people around you, right? You're a burden. You're not getting better. You can't break out of these patterns. It was absolute hopelessness, and thinking to myself, like, this is the best thing I can do for the world, let alone myself, to stop this suffering. And also, I was dealing with horrible panic attacks at the time, where I thought, like, my heart was racing so hard, beating so hard, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And that was a huge fear I had for a long time. Like, oh, I'm going to have a heart attack at 20 some years old. And that, I think, was one of the things that really made me want to commit suicide. Was just like this, the thought of it was just like, that suffering is so great, like
hmm
that it's a physical suffering from this anxiety, and I just wanted it to stop.
so you, I want to touch on that the whole thing what you mentioned about the whole psychedelics because that's becoming a very big talking point in society now, and it's being recommended for people for healing and this and that.
Right.
And maybe there is some value in it, maybe there's some benefit to it, but I want to just talk about that from your perspective. You said that there was some temporary relief but it wasn't permanent. Can you just go into that a little
Yeah,
bit?
like, I would basically, is that the word hallucinogen, for, I don't know if it's still up on the internet or whatever, but it basically, it means a mind wandering, ex, mind wandering experience. Or I can't. Yeah, so even marijuana is technically classified as a hallucinogen, but obviously when you smoke marijuana, you're not really going to start seeing, people think you're going to, the word hallucinogen means you're going to see pink elephants and stuff,
hmm
right? Obviously, that's not the case. It's actually very real, right? It's a very real experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And everybody will tell you that it doesn't matter who you are. If you take psychedelics, you're gonna have a very similar experience, regardless of what your background is, or whether you live in the middle of nowhere in Africa or if you live in downtown New York, right? So it really is an experience, a very real experience that actually seems more real than
This reality that
not
we're in.
being on it,
Yeah.
right? Which is very interesting. But basically, it's a very powerful introspective experience. So it's really not like a party drug, right? It's not like drinking, and it forces you to take a hard look at yourself and to even consider how your behavior might be affecting other people. Like when I even was smoking marijuana, I'd be like thinking about interaction I had earlier that day and then seeing it from a different perspective and putting myself in that person's shoes and trying to figure out, oh, like maybe they took that this way and not the way that I meant it to be taken or whatever, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it makes you it can be very good in that respect. It can really help you improve on bad behavior, right? I really do believe that. But what it was, what I've heard said is like the difference between a medicine and a drug is a medicine. So when you use psychedelics as medicine, is that it's integration. It's like you're going to learn some things about yourself, and you need to integrate that into your life to
Mm-hmm.
get benefit from it. If you're just taking it because you want to trip out and you're not integrating anything that you learn, then it's just a drug. And a lot of people, they get really into it, they're doing it all the time, every weekend or whatever, trying to reach this first experience that they ever had using mushrooms, for example. But you can never get that again. Once you hit a certain peak on mushrooms, you'll never get to that peak again, because it's like a cathartic experience that you go through to reach that high, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm. But you
So
weren't using it on that level where you were. You were trying to continuously get it to
no,
that.
no, me, it was
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't even, yeah, it was, I wanted to get something out of it that I can then incorporate into my life to improve myself or
Mm-hmm.
be a better person or whatever. Um,
Which it sounds like you got a little bit, or
oh yeah, like it made me. I mean, it uh, it definitely humbles you,
right.
right? Like you can think that you're king of the world, and you're so great and whatever, and then you'll take mushrooms and realize like it humbles you. Like you can't. It's such a powerful experience. Like that's why I think people that like to be in control can't handle it. Like if
Mm.
you want to be in control all
Yeah.
the time, and then you're not going to be able to handle it. You really can't, because once you take it, it's like somebody says, like you're embarking on a train, and the train is going to get to its destination, and the train's not going to stop, and the doors aren't going to open, and you're not going to have an opportunity to get off until it gets to its destination. So if you're a control freak, it's not something that you're going to want to do or be able to enjoy in any way, shape, or form, right? And the thing too with me, it was like every time I did mushrooms, there was always an anxiety towards doing it, and I would always have to deal with this shame, right, that of my behavior.
Mm.
Every time I would end up just like on the floor. Every time I'd end up on the floor, literally rolling around, trying to, like, wrestling with this intense shame
Mm.
from so many months that had gone by where I had behaved terribly towards my own mother, for example, right?
Oh.
And it's literally, you want to call your mom up and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, and I love you
Mm.
so much," and you know,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
it can't, it.
So you were getting some benefits out of it, but it was temporary. So
Yeah,
you
it
just.
wasn't like, for one thing that was long lasting was like anxiety and depression. It did help a lot. Um, it did help a lot. I actually approached my doctor about it. I said, if you have patients that are suffering with anxiety and nothing's helping, you have a responsibility to let them know about mushrooms, because there's a lot of scientific evidence showing that it can be very helpful, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, yeah, I was still going through that cycle of just like just anger, bad behavior, shame, suicidality, burning bridges, cutting people off, not being able to hold a job down, just like this constant cycle, never ending. And finally, you come to the conclusion like, well, the best thing to do is just end it because you just keep hurting people and hurting yourself, and the suffering is so great and it's too much to cope with, right?
And all that was happening even after you had those hallucinogenic
Yeah,
experiences, that it was causing you to wrestle with all
yeah,
these dark thoughts,
yeah.
which is kind of the point that I want to focus on, in the sense that maybe there is some value in these things. Maybe there
Oh,
is like some
100%,
short-term value,
for
but that's the
sure.
problem, is that it's a
Yeah,
short-term gain,
yeah.
whereas in the long term, what is it truly worth?
Yeah, what I would say is like for the last time I ever used DMT, I was terrified of this stuff, right? After the
Mm,
first time I used it, I was like, man, this is the most insane thing I've ever done, and not in a rush to ever try it again, right?
mm-hmm,
But then, so many years later, 10 years, almost 10 years later, when I was so suicidal, I was like, you know what? Maybe this is what I need to do. I need to do it again.
mm-hmm,
So I did, and I would definitely recommend, like, I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. It is a bottomless pit of confoundment, and it will not answer any questions. It will leave you with a million more questions. But if you are planning on committing suicide, I would say before you do that, try DMT. I
mm-hmm.
would, in a heartbeat, I would say that. If you're for sure that you're going to commit suicide, I would say try DMT first, okay? But at the same time, I am not condoning it. I don't think I can't recommend it to anybody. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I've never tried to convince anybody to use it. Um,
So then,
Maybe one
what
person
is the
actually,
benefit
but
then? But then, what is the benefit if you're suicidal of
so for
doing
me,
it?
it was it because the experience is so intense and so anxiety inducing, and it's like, it just makes you, it puts things in perspective because you've, like, I don't know about you, but for me it's like literally, it's, I don't know what death is like, but it makes you feel like you've died, right? But then you
Right.
come back from it and you go, oh, I haven't died. And suddenly you realize just how grateful you are for having your life and being in your body, right? And so it's like you're going through this experience that's so intense, that's far more intense than whatever feelings you might be feeling or anxiety you might be experiencing, that then you realize that you can actually handle more than you think you can. And so for me, it was like, it immediately, what it did for me was like it helped me immediately with my breathing. I was breathing much deeper
Mm,
after the after I used it, when I was dealing with this horrible anxiety and not being able to sleep, and it did help. But again, I was still having these. I was still a huge marijuana user,
mm,
and still didn't really have any real hope.
mm.
Right, my hope was tied into the world and trying to stop. I didn't want the world to go down the path that it's currently on, and my hope was that I could, reach the people that are nearest to me and get them to see what I see and what a lot of people are waking up to, which is that there is this, these occult forces in the world that are working behind the scenes, that are moving towards a very definite agenda. And
All right. Okay. Before we get
yeah,
into all that stuff, I just want to focus on the whole, the whole death thing and experiencing almost a mini death prior to taking your own life, and it always reminds me of people that have regrets right away when they try to commit suicide,
of
where
course,
and they
yes,
think about it right away. We're
yeah,
like, oh, why did I do
oh, for
this?
sure, for sure.
So you're saying the DMT can almost give you a dose of that, where you have that mini death,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely. Yeah, that's a
afterwards.
very good way of putting it. Very good
Okay.
way of putting it. Because
Okay.
yeah, for sure, that's what I've heard too. It's like everybody who's ever attempted suicide, the first thought they have is dang, I made a mistake. I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have done
Mm-hmm.
this.
And the
Right?
DMT can be a small way of at least doing that.
Yeah.
But again, it's temporary, and afterwards you're still back to using weed all the time,
Yeah.
and you're still back to kind of that same pattern that you
Yeah.
said, where you're still burning bridges, destroying relationships, a lot of anger still that's within you, a lot of that
Yeah.
resentment and bitterness. So
Yeah.
let's get to, how did all that then eventually lead you to the Bible, to coming to God?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
that's the crescendo, as I see,
Yeah.
of the
So,
story. So there's a happy ending, folks.
yeah. So essentially, essentially, I am like the most stubborn individual that I know. I don't even know if that's the right word, but extremely stubborn, extremely, just uh,
Thick-headed.
yeah, narcissistic tendencies, right? So not NPD, not full blown narcissistic personality disorder, but having these, like, because my ego is,
Just make sure the
yeah,
mic is close to you,
yeah,
because this is
sorry,
an important part. The important part.
yeah.
I want to make sure
So
people get it.
because deep down I think so little of myself, right? I'm so insecure that I want to, I can't even think of what I'm trying to say here. Um Basically God had to humble me, right? He had to
Mm,
humble me over and over and over and over, a million times
amen.
before I could accept him, right? And again, I did not believe the Bible. I thought that if any part of the Bible is not true, then I cannot accept it as truth, right? It had to be completely true for me to accept it. So while all these other things were happening throughout my life, I was always looking for the truth. And one of the things that led me to on that road was the fact when I found out that amphetamines are legal, being prescribed to children, yet marijuana relatively is really non-toxic and non-addictive compared to those drugs, yet are illegal for, even at the time was illegal for even adults to use or grow, right? And that's where the medical marijuana program actually became a part of the medical marijuana program
Right.
at the age of 23 years old. So I got a federal exemption and blah blah blah. That's how strongly I felt about all this. But so yeah, so that led me down this road of like looking for the truth. Like if this could be happening, then what else is happening out there, right? That we're being lied about, or
Mm.
okay.
Made you question everything.
Yeah. So I kept questioning everything and wanting to educate everyone around me about whatever it is I was finding out. And my hope was tied in, that was like, oh, if I can just get people to see what I can see or what I've discovered, then the world could become a better place, right? And my hope was tied in that, and I was becoming more and more aggressive regarding that, especially once COVID hit. I was, you know, nothing was adding up, and I was trying to get people to see that nothing is adding up. But again, people want to be friends with the world. They want to be accepted by their immediate, by the group, right?
Friends and family, close by
Yeah, it's
people.
a group think. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want people to not accept me because I'm not
Yeah.
going with the what because I'm going against the grain or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so then I was just like, okay, well, what if the Bible is true? And I started looking into it. I had a lot of questions. Well, why would God make the devil? And a million questions. And I started looking for answers, diligently, really seeking out the truth. And what I found was is that Christians, like Bible believing Christians, had more. They didn't have more answers. They had all the answers about everything, about
Mm.
literally everything, about every conspiracy you can possibly, every taboo subject, everything. They had all the answers. And I was like, dang, this one group of people that I would avoid and would never listen to their opinion on all of these different topics that I was looking into my whole life, because I thought that they were like weak minded and they couldn't face reality like I was able to face reality. And they fell into religion, and held on to that. And then realizing that actually, no, these people knew more than I did or as much as I did about all the things I've been looking into, and yet they don't have fear. They're, they still have hope because their hope is not tied into the world. Their hope is tied into God, right? And I'd still, even like looking into this, I still didn't understand that Jesus Christ was God, that he is God. That still took a long time to really sink in, that like, man, like, it's been Jesus Christ all along. The truth that I've been looking for was Jesus Christ the whole time. He's been under my nose the whole time, and I rejected him the whole time, because, and it really comes down to the fact that you need to humble yourself. God, the Bible says God resists the proud. He can't work, he can't do anything, you know,
So
with
you
a
had tried
proud
all these
individual.
things.
So yeah,
You,
it took me to finally admit, like, look, I've tried everything, and nothing has worked, and and again, like looking into even like evolution and a lot of different topics, that made me realize like the Bible is actually completely true from cover to cover. Period. Right. And so at that point, that all that was left was for me to get on my knees and and admit that that I'm the problem, that my sin is the problem, that from a very young age I was I was making decisions that was hurting me, and they were sinful things, that I was even taking the amphetamines. I'm not saying don't do it if you have a need for it and if it helps you or whatever, but in my case it was like, it was totally sinful, right? It was something I chose to do, that I can no longer blame my parents for it. So then it was then so that at that point it's like, is me taking responsibility for what my life had become and how I was, right? And through that I was able to forgive my parents, which I had incredible hatred towards. And that was very freeing, right? Very, very freeing. So, and that's the hard thing about, that's the hardest part about sharing the gospel, is like, it's mostly bad news.
yeah, the
It's
world is full of
Yeah,
evil. The
it's
world is,
mostly bad. The bad news is you're a sinner and you need a savior. And most
yeah,
people think, no, I'm not a sinner. I'm not a bad person. Because they're all comparing themselves to other people,
yeah.
right? And
We're
that's yeah,
always out there looking at Joe or
yeah,
Bob. Oh, I'm not as bad as that
yeah,
guy. He cheated on his wife, or I'm not
yeah,
mad as this guy. He
yeah.
killed somebody.
So
But
we really can't. I know that the only way for me to get to heaven is through Jesus Christ. Is through God's grace alone. Period. Because I have no, my righteousness is, like the Bible says, is filthy rags to God. It's any good thing I do is tainted, right? Even if I could, it's if people that think, oh, I can live a holy life, and then God will accept me. It was like, yeah, but what about all the sins you did before that?
or
And
your
anybody,
thoughts,
yeah,
even.
and anybody that thinks that they can actually live a sinless life is completely insane. If you could, then you would be Jesus Christ yourself, and you're not.
Yeah.
So why don't you just trust in what he already did for you, and thank God for it, and accept it, and apply it to yourself, and get saved. Get saved today.
So yeah, I just want to focus on the whole humbling yourself,
Yeah,
because I think that truly is an important point to focus on. That
yeah,
you had tried everything on your own.
yeah,
You were stubborn. You were proud in your own knowledge. You were trying
yeah,
to show the way to other
yeah.
people. And maybe that was leading to more conflict, more issues in your
Oh, big time, big
relationships.
time.
And eventually you realized, even with that, and then plus all the Reiki stuff, all the energy healing, all the psychedelics, so you're
Yeah,
trying everything,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
seek the truth,
yeah,
and none of it was working, or at least it was nothing permanent, nothing long lasting. And eventually you had to just truly humble thyself, be poor in spirit,
yeah,
and approach, because as we know, we live in a society of pride, and the number one thing that combats pride is humility,
yeah,
right? That's the counter to that vice is the
yeah,
virtue of humility. So what did that even look like? Like, I'm just curious. What did that day look like when you just finally had? Was it like a one day where like that eureka moment, or was it, I guess, like a process where you
No,
just?
like I said, so for me it's like because I'm so incredibly stubborn, it took me years to really come to the conclusion that that God is not, like, I already knew God was real, but I didn't know who God was, and I did not think that it was the God of the Bible, right? And
And who are these
so,
Christians that you were meeting that were?
well, it wasn't it's people I found online,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And
just people sharing the
yeah,
gospel,
like
people sharing testimony.
yeah, there's like Chuck Missler, for example. We'll get into transhumanism. There's a great lecture on transhumanism. And I was very aware of these issues, right? And you realize like, oh, this is actually all biblical. This is Satan's version of eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
Is going to be through
Mm-hmm.
technology, right?
Mm,
And all these elites and people that they want to live forever using, transferring their brain into a computer, right? Or stuff like that. So so the more
which
I,
is a whole nother
yeah,
podcast for a whole
yeah,
nother
the
time,
more the
folks.
more I learned
We'll do that a
about,
whole
yeah,
other
the
day.
more I learned about what was really going on in the world, and then it was driving me crazy essentially. And but then when I started to learn about what the Bible actually says, I was like, oh wait, this everything that's happening in the world is a an inversion of what Jesus Christ is going to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like literally the world is being set up for the Antichrist, for the replacement Christ, right? And when he
Mm-hmm.
comes on the scene, the world is going to embrace him, right? So
So slowly but surely, you realize, okay, the Bible is the truth. It's cover to cover,
yeah,
like you said.
yeah. Again, so I was so stubborn that I was like, okay, well, what about evolution? Because we went to public school, I was taught that the truth is that we all came out of the slime essentially, and that that evolution is what brought us to where we are. Which I looked into that. There's a great documentary. I can't speak. Is Genesis History that was made free just a few years ago. Extremely well produced. We're talking about PhDs at the highest levels of various scientific fields that have all come to the conclusion that no, actually, the only thing that makes scientific sense is the Genesis account, that everything was created to work together in symbiosis, right? There's no other explanation. Like Darwin didn't know anything about DNA, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're still teaching that this theory is being fact. It's not fact. And the guy was a next level racist. In fact, I believe, and many people do as well, is that racism actually comes from the theory of evolution, because people literally believe that, and I'm not. You can look this up for yourself, but that it's like, for example, the Japanese during World War II, they were taught the theory of evolution, and they were taught that Americans were closer to apes because they had more hair on their body, more body hair, and therefore the Japanese were more evolved than they were, and that made it easier for them to torture them in horrific ways or even bury them alive and dance on their graves, right? So like how do human beings carry out such incredible evil, right?
They use
It's
evolution.
they yeah, it all comes back to being really deceived,
I mean,
right?
Hitler and the Nazis, right?
Yeah,
That's what he was talking about. We're
yeah,
the superior
yeah.
race, or
And they're trying to
compared
create
to.
the Ubermensch, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because I remember distinctly how my brother even said that like back many years ago, of how the whole hair thing too. Oh, if you have less hair in your body, then that means you're technically more evolved than
Yeah.
somebody that has more hair or something. And it's just
And that,
those
that
types of
that's very interesting
justifications.
because I never thought of this, but whenever you see a portrayal of an alien being on TV or movies or whatever, they're always hairless,
Mm.
right? So the whole idea is that, oh, through evolution, we're eventually going to evolve to be like the idea that we have of space aliens, and we're going to go and colonize other planets and whatever. It's a satanic lie. It's
Mm.
completely satanic. It's completely Luciferian, right? And
Mm.
that's what, then Hitler, what do you believe? He thought, oh well, we can direct human evolution.
The eugenics.
Yeah,
Yeah. force
So
people down the certain path, get
yeah,
rid of the disabled, the all the races that didn't
yeah,
fit his ideal mold of the perfect genetic race or whatever.
yeah,
And yeah, it's crazy to think about how when people turn away from God, one of the biggest justifications is that, oh, God, he leads to so much suffering. There's so much evil in the world. There can't be God or whatever. So then they turn to science as their savior.
a
But
hundred
meanwhile,
percent.
science has led to like an umpteenth amount more of suffering and death and chaos than
Yeah,
God. So it's like if that's the basis that you're using, that God leads to suffering, well, your science, which is the alternative, leads to like 10x, 100x,
yeah,
infinite amount
yeah.
of more of suffering and
True.
death.
And
So.
there's a very good saying. It's in French. It's nulle science est à l'abri de la corruption, de la politique et du pouvoir. So no science is sheltered from the corruption of power and politics, right? So the
Mhm.
issue is corruption, and the issue
Mhm.
is that we're corrupt, right?
Mhm.
And if we can't face that, and you know, instead of trying to instead of deciding for ourselves what is right and wrong, we need an objective truth, which is the Bible that says this is this is right, this is wrong. And if you trust that God can see everything and through time and everything, that if you trust in what He says is right, that you will be blessed for it,
Mhm.
right? Because He can't bless sin, right?
And
So
we need that source of absolute truth, which we know in our heart exists. Because I was just listening to this dissertation on the Nuremberg trials and what the people were concluding out of it, and how when they were looking at what the soldiers did, what the Nazis did, how it was just pure evil without any context, without any need for contextualizing it. Like there's evil where you can't say, oh yeah, but in this case, like so sometimes people will say like, okay, yeah, stealing is bad, but if you're stealing for the sake of feeding the poor, maybe in that case it's good, right? Sometimes people try to contextualize it and say, yeah, so you know what, evil is relative, bad, what's good is bad, it's just relative based on the situation. But there's certain things that are so evil that regardless of how you try to contextualize it, there's no way of putting it in a way that you could say, yeah, that was good if you looked at it from this point of view. No, that was the conclusion of the Nuremberg trials, that the evil was so pervasive and it was so deep down and bad and disgusting that there is no way of looking at it in a relativistic sense where you could say that evil was justified. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people need to realize, that in a culture where we're sold this relativistic view of the world, that your yuck is my yum, or whatever, what's good to you might be good, or what's beautiful to you might not be beautiful to me, whatever. But no, there are objective standards in the world, and we know it in our heart. It's just the society just lies to us over and over again to make us believe that there is some sort of relativistic truth, but in reality that
yeah,
objectivity only really truly comes from the Bible, from God.
yes, and that's the thing, is like, the freest countries in the world have are were built on Judeo-Christian values. Our laws come from the Bible. So as we do away with the Bible, we're also going to lose our freedom, right? And so it's funny that you have people that say, "Oh, this is such an oppressive country and whatever." It's like, well, can you, like, where would you go to not feel like you're oppressed, right? It's like you're not going to go to Saudi Arabia and wear rainbow tights and walk down the road and expect that to fly, right?
Yeah,
That's why people come from countries where they're actually oppressed, and they come here to experience a better life. And yet our country is based on Judeo-Christian values, right?
people just
The
don't have that
Yeah,
perspective.
so the reality is like, I'm not the judge of people. God is, right? And God gave everyone free will. So I respect that, just like God
Mm.
respects it, right? Doesn't mean that I have to accept it, right? Doesn't mean I have to promote it, or, you know,
Yeah,
it's a
and that's
very touchy topic, but
mhm. So tell me just okay, once you came to the point of accepting the Bible, accepting God, and most importantly, accepting Christ. So what impact did that have in your life? How have you changed, or can you just go a bit into that?
Well, basically, the Holy Spirit will redefine what you thought was a sin, right? So before being saved, you have your own ideas of what is actually right or wrong, and what is, comparing yourself to other people, and then but the truth will will become more evident that you're a lot more sinful than you might have thought you were, right? um
You're faced with this mirror
yeah, like, well,
of
yeah, one of the number one things was like, I always wanted to quit smoking marijuana, and I knew like this is something I didn't. It's the thing too, is like, I wasn't sure, I wasn't sure that I was even saved, right? So I still thought like, oh, I have to do certain things or live a certain way in order to be saved, right? So I can't even say exactly when I got saved. I don't know when that day was, right? But I knew there was a day where I came to the conclusion that, hey, I can no longer deny it. I've seen enough evidence. I've looked at enough information to conclude that the Bible is completely true. And not only that, that if the Bible isn't true, that there is absolutely no truth to be found in the world, which is very sad. And
and what are the fruits of your life? Like how is that born fruit in terms of just your personality or those relationships and this and that? Because again, before you were in this constant cycle,
yeah,
you were
the
smoking weed all the time. So just how did all that stuff
I would
change?
say the two biggest things is, number one, being able to forgive people, forgive my parents. No long, and there's a couple times where I still slipped into that victim mentality, okay, about all this, but
It's a process.
yeah, even then though, it's like I am 99.8%, healed from that through forgiveness. It really freed me, right? And no longer carrying all this anger. And that's what allowed me to actually successfully get off marijuana for good. I have zero desire to use marijuana. I'm actually afraid of it to a certain extent. So, and the other thing
So wait,
was,
how long have you has it been since you stopped smoking weed?
I can't even, I think it's going to be coming up on 2 years, but maybe more, maybe 3 years. I'm not
Mm,
even sure, to be
2 3
honest.
years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something I never thought would actually happen,
Which
right? It's
again, this
something I
was your
always,
identity. You were
yeah,
growing
yeah,
it. You
yeah,
had the
yeah, yeah,
hair. You had the tattoos.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You tried.
It was all
It
I
was
knew.
it was
Really, it
all you
was all I
knew.
knew.
3 days was the max
Yeah,
you could go. And then after coming to Christ, after coming to the Bible, you were able
yeah.
to let go,
It was
and the
after
forgiveness,
admitting that I was the problem in my life, that I was my own worst enemy, that it was
letting go of the victim
to take
mentality.
responsibility, to, that was the biggest help ever, right? Like, the truth shall set you free, and that was the truth, that it was my own doing,
It's
right?
powerful.
And then the other thing was, so now my perspective had totally changed from wanting to save the world to wanting to see people get saved, right?
Mm.
Like,
So some people might
yeah,
not realize how big of it sounds
it's a
subtle, but it's a big
complete
shift.
switch in perspective. So now I'm no longer aggressively trying to convince people of the corruption that's going on in the world, and to face it when they don't want to, because it comes with a lot of anxiety and depression and all these emotions that I dealt with, that they don't want to face, right? They just want to stay in their own little bubble of reality, and kind of hard. It's not, you can't really blame them when they're not saved, right? But to go from that to, hey, I'm going to switch my perspective completely and go, now I have a burden for souls, where I want to see people get saved. Like, forget all this stuff that I was going on about for over 10 years, about all these different things that people believe, that are completely nonsensical, that are actually being used to that have a political agenda behind them, to bring in a one world government, essentially. Um, Forget about all that. here's the truth about Jesus Christ and you need to hear it. This is the truth about biblical Christianity and it's not what you thought it was. This is not a
Mm.
religion. I'm not trying to give you my religion. I'm trying to give you the truth, you know?
And Christ says that as well, right? That he didn't come to save the world, but to for each person that calls on his name.
Right.
So it's not about
Yeah, and
saving the
yeah,
world,
he
but
didn't come to
on each
condemn
per.
the world. He came to that people might be saved through him, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So,
So you saw this shift. You were able to actually face others, forgive them, forgive yourself also for maybe some of the evil that you had committed. And now you're going to church on a regular basis. And do you still have those anxieties? Do you still have that ADHD, all that stuff? Are you on Ritalin at all?
no,
Or
no, no. I'm not taking any psychotropic drugs. The only thing I'm struggling with at the moment is nicotine use,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Which I do want to give up. Um,
mm-hmm.
but
But all that anxiety kind of went away for the most part, or do you still
yeah,
experience it
yeah. The
from
thing
just like
is,
the regular
yeah,
stuff,
a
you
lot
know?
of people think marijuana helps them with anxiety, but in reality, for me, it was actually causing a lot of anxiety.
Mm.
So yeah,
So the anxiety went away, those depressed suicidal ideations
yeah,
and thoughts went away,
yeah. Because now
and
I can look back in my life and go, oh, God was actually there the whole time, and He was allowing me to go through all of these things so that I could be, because He needed to humble me. I had to be humbled a million times to finally come to finally come to Him. Right? It had to happen that way, and now so then I can actually look back on my life with gratitude because I could have easily died and went to hell, right? And I didn't, and that's because of his grace, right? So now I could actually appreciate all the pain and suffering I went through because at least it led to my salvation or his salvation. And now it's like now I have everything. Now I can lose everything physically, but gain everything spiritually, and that's huge. So it's like I'm actually rich now, when I was totally poor in every sense of the word before that, right?
and I believe the Bible also says how our trials and tribulations happen such that we can use that as a way to learn from it and then help others as well
Yeah,
from our own trials. And I truly believe that this story that you shared today and your trials and tribulations can be something for somebody else maybe at home that might be going through some similar things, and
yeah,
they might be able to take something away from it. So I want to maybe that's a perfect place to conclude this conversation, because I think you've gone through everything pretty in depth and just shared all the issues you've gone through, all the negativity associated with it, coming to God, coming to the Bible, man. And I don't know if there's any last thoughts that you have that you think that's worth sharing with people before we end this.
I would just say that Satan is very real. He is a million times smarter than you'll ever be. He knows the Bible more than any human being on the planet, and he has he has done a lot of work to corrupt the Bible and to infiltrate the church and cause a lot of divisions and a lot of basically cults. So just be aware of that. And, there's a reason why there's like, I don't know how many, like 200 English translations of the Bible. You don't need that many translations. It's not to make it easier to understand. Um, Stick with the King James. Look into that issue, look into the history of it. And yeah, you're saved by grace through faith, period. You need to, when you read the Bible, a lot of it will condemn you, especially as an unsaved individual, but you need to apply the Pauline epistles to whatever it is that you're reading as a Christian. Okay? Don't let anybody convince you that you can lose your salvation. The devil will absolutely work on you very hard to make you think that you're not saved, even if you are come to Christ today with feeling or without feeling. There's no better deal on the planet. You get everything for basically nothing. He did it all for you. Accept him by faith, accept that by faith, and apply it to yourself. And get saved today. Today is the day of salvation. Now is the acceptable time.
Amen. Amen. Can we end it off with a quick prayer?
Sure.
Mind if I say it real quick?
Yeah.
All right. Dear Lord, thank you so much for having the opportunity to listen to this wonderful testimony given by Paul, all the trials and tribulations that he faced and all the difficulties. It was all for a reason. You knew, you knew the whole time that he had to go through such difficulties. He had to go through so much pain such that he could eventually be poor, poor in spirit, be low like you were low, like you lowered yourself to us, so that we can be humbled and eventually come back to you as we all should. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I pray for anybody that's at home that might not understand you, might not know your way, that this might be a small step, a small window into the life that they might also have, the opportunity that might also be given to them. And I ask you to open this up for them to also realize that your grace, your love, your kindness is unconditional and is unending. Thank you, Jesus Christ, Lord. Amen.
Amen.